Many have noted that with the explosion of social media and streaming services, people today are listening to more and a greater diversity of music than ever before. Any barriers to finding new music have largely been broken down. Music from anywhere on the planet is available at the click of a button. And on top of that, making music is now more accessible and more affordable than ever before. So why then does it feel like music is less diverse than ever? Why does it seem like a handful of styles have come to dominate most genres? Like how most new rap utilizes the same boring trap beats, or how most new metal bands are some sort of vaguely metalcore adjacent act, or how modern country has turned into nothing but non-distinct pop music with a slight twang. Or more broadly, that regional scenes and styles barely exist anymore. That is exactly what I want to talk about today. I'm not going to spend much more time sitting on my thesis here, as the title spells it out pretty plainly. The internet killed regional music, and in turn has killed diversity, and it's created a sort of homogenization of music. Take, for example, how in the 90s you had Seattle grunge, West Coast G-funk, New York hardcore, Houston slab, so on and so on. These days, outside of some quite small and fairly niche genres, these styles hardly exist anymore. But if people now have an endless access to more music than they ever have, why are we seeing this homogenization? You would think that it would be the opposite, right? Well, no, actually. And I think the reason why can be explained with biology and evolution. Now, I understand that biology and culture are obviously not one and the same, and the relationship between them is a little bit complicated. But stay with me here. If you're familiar with evolution, you're familiar with how species adapt and evolve in different environments. Aspects like geography and climate will, over time, cause a species to change, such as plants becoming succulent in order to store water in drier climates, or how humans have changed in various ways since we migrated out of Africa. Or a more apt comparison might be how isolation, such as islands, cause species to change. Human culture is, I think, much the same way. Just throw in some other aspects like socioeconomics and demographics, and you get regional scenes and cultures. As genres like folk, then later rock, metal, and hip-hop spread throughout the country, and eventually the world, they changed and adapted based on the demographics and the people making them. People took these sounds and incorporated their own experiences and perspectives. They incorporated aspects of their culture. Early heavy metal bands like Sabbath and Zeppelin were quite bluesy, since it came from rock and roll, which in turn came from blues. But over time, and particularly under the influence of European bands, metal would come to incorporate more chromaticism and classical influences, allowing the genre to find new legs, which in turn would find its way back across the pond, where American bands would incorporate more hardcore influences, creating genres like thrash metal and death metal. However, that blues sound never went away in metal, and for some bands, like those in New Orleans, it became a defining aspect of their sound. These styles, known as doom metal and sludge metal, would splinter off into three main scenes: the New Orleans scene, the Palm Desert scene, and the Seattle scene. The New Orleans scene was obviously the bluesiest, but it was also the darkest and the heaviest, which makes sense. It's New Orleans. It's hot, it's humid, and there's a lot of crime, drugs, and poverty. The Palm Desert scene, on the other hand, took it in a more hard rock direction and incorporated more psychedelic influences, while the Seattle scene was much more experimental and artsy and would produce what would become known as drone metal. It's also from the Seattle sludge scene that we would get grunge music. A lot of people don't know this, but sludge was actually a really big influence on grunge. And not just because Kurt heard the Melvins on the radio and thought they sounded cool or whatever, but because these musicians knew each other. Buzz Osborne was the man who got Kurt into punk rock. Dylan Carlson from Earth was Kurt's best friend. All of these bands were in the same city, the same area. They were playing the same shows together. They knew each other. They were influencing each other. And this is precisely what I think modern music lacks, and it shows. Music is no longer being driven by people interacting with each other, but more so by algorithms. And I think by this point, we've seen how algorithms have really stifled creativity and forced people to do what works for the algorithm. And it's not just that modern music lacks diversity, but I think it also lacks a sort of je ne sais quoi. pardon my French. These regional scenes and styles gave us a window into where these bands and artists were from. A peek into the life, culture, and values of their home. Less and less, I feel like I get that from new bands and artists. I don't feel like I'm getting a window into where they're from. I'm just getting a look into whatever is most marketable or does best in the algorithm. And I think that's a shame. Maybe it's just because I'm a nerd for this kind of stuff, but I love different cultures. Whether we're talking music or art or food, it's really cool and interesting to see what people from other places are doing and how they do it. But now, if you're an up-and-coming rapper, whether you're from Vancouver, Beijing, or Atlanta, your music is probably going to sound more or less the same. But here's the thing. I don't think that it has to be that way. I think we've let the internet kill regional music, but I think we've done so mostly unknowingly. I think that if there is a conceited effort to maybe try to rebuild local scenes, or if artists stop trying to be so algorithmic, we can strike a balance. Now, I'm not saying to abandon the internet, and I understand that we have to play ball. And to be fair, on occasion we have seen that the internet itself can also produce its own sort of regional scenes, like the MySpace era or the SoundCloud rap era. But I think the takeaway here is that if you're a musician or some other kind of artist, stop focusing so much on what the algorithm wants you to make, disconnect, and see what's going on around you. I've heard it said that the internet killed the monoculture, and in some aspects, I agree. But I also think there's a little bit more nuance in that. Because I think in some ways, the internet has created more of a monoculture. And with music in particular, I think we're seeing more of that monoculture than we ever have before. Anyways, that's enough of my ramblings. If you enjoyed the video, a like and subscribe goes a long way to help the channel.